Yeah. Out in the yard where the grass grows wild, CiottiFPV's goggles locked, grinning like a child. Teddy Spaghetti's fur flies and jet wash dreams, yeah. Chasing small whoops like a dog possessed fiend. Eyes on a neon blur, hard in the chase. Big fuzz and prop spin all tangled in place, yeah. Four-legged rebel with a rotor stir tail in the circus of the sky. They never fail. CiottiFPV, Teddy Spaghetti, dynamic duo kings, barking at the breeze, throttling at top speed. They zooming through hoops, flipping in style. That schnauzer's got throttle and a toothy smile. Yeah. Shotty's on sticks, Teddy's on paws. Side by side, legends breaking all the laws. Through the kitchen, over couch scale terrain. Backyard mayhem in their flight domain. No ground too sacred, no loop too tight. Fuzz, fuel, fury ignites the night. When pilot and pup lock eyes on the prize, every whoop they conquer is a fresh cut surprise. Yeah. Shotty behind the sticks, Teddy's leading the pack. Prop guard missiles unleashed, never looking back. No leash, no map, just freestyle mic. They on the dog drone streets every day and night. Said whoops, hitting low, gotta nail the dive. Teddy push throttle up, feel the beast come alive. I see the neon arc, got the sticks locked in, Teddy. Yeah, let's rip this loop, ride the roar of the wind, Teddy. Yep. Yeah, CiottiFPV, Teddy Spaghetti, diamond and duo kings, barking at the breeze, throttling at top speed, zooming through hoops, flipping in style. That schnauzer's got throttle and a toothy smile. Teddy Spaghetti. Barking at the breeze, throttling at top speed, things zooming through hoops, flipping in style. That schnauzer's got throttle and a toothy smile. Yeah, when you hear that bar cut the rotor hum, you know Ciotti and Teddy's mission's just begun. FPV's fur-faced legends sing it loud. Yeah, Teddy Spaghetti and CiottiFPV always proud. Yeah.
What's up, friends? My name's Aaron Ciotti. Everybody calls me Ciotti. That was this little guy. This is a BLV4 Acro-B that I moved into the Mosquito 2.5-inch frame, and I swapped the motors over. It came with the crazy 0804 motors. I moved it over to the Flow 1102 18,000 kV, and then it's got bi-blade 2.5-inch props on it. I haven't toothpicked in a while. It was interesting. It reminded me of all the toothpick things. Can't crash them. Very slidey, but boy, do they boogie. They cover ground like absolute hell. This thing is probably going to be for sale. I'm not totally sure, but yeah, that was on 2S double BT 2.0 lead with two 300 mAh batteries in the bottom there. Yeah, if you're desperate for this, let me know. Otherwise, it'll be on the Etsy store eventually, I believe. Tonight, we're going to be diving into a scratch build. This is a Cinesplore that one of my favorite Fiverr clients, Drew, sent over to me to be built. I will do custom builds. It's just typically like prohibitively expensive. It's $80 an hour, and a typical scratch build is going to take me at least 6 or so hours. And so, yeah, I don't get many of them, but every once in a while, yeah, I will do a build for somebody, and I usually do them outside of the live streams, but I had a heinously busy day today, and only got home like not even an hour ago, I don't think, and I'm just completely brain dead, and I don't know what else to do tonight. And this was sitting on the bench, so I said, you know what? We haven't done a scratch build in a while. Why don't we kind of dive into this, and hopefully I can solder something. I'll give you guys some soldering tips. We can talk about, like, you know, sort of the simplest way to start builds. A lot of times we put the motors on, or we deal with the motor wires first, because it's kind of like the coolest... most fun part, but I actually find that you want to do that sort of last, and we'll kind of talk about why. And so, yeah, bunch of build tips and soldering tips, and the beginning of an awesome Cinesplore. Cinesplore is FPV Cycle's Cinewoop. It's pretty much like the lightest, proper, essentially what Bob did, Bob Rugi, Kebab, who runs FPV Cycle. He waited for all the other Cinewoops to kind of come out, and then he put his out, not like last, but a lot later, like almost a year after all the other Cinewoops had come out. And he took little lessons from all of them and incorporated them into this. And what's actually really interesting is, like, I don't know of any, like, proper Cinewoops that came out after this. This was kind of like the last real Cinewoop. After this, everything started to come out with AIOs and prop guards, not ducts, which are not Cinewoops, in my opinion. Cinewoop is something that's designed to fly slowly and super safe. Big, tall duct, practically no chance that anybody's going to get hurt. The big tall duct also slows it down so that you can fly it at like 5-10 miles an hour, super controllable, dead straight line. You turn it, it turns immediately. Room for a 20 by 20 stack so that it's really reliable and you don't have to worry about it falling out of the air. And yeah, that's a Cinewoop to me. And the Cinesplore really is like, you know, go figure. He waited. He learned from all the other ones. It's better than pretty much all the other old school Cinewoops. It's significantly lighter than pretty much all of them. It's much more sort of modular and adaptable. There's 4 different ducts that you can put on, at least 4 different ducts that you can put on this thing. One of the ducts was molded by HQ and is pretty much indestructible. Yeah, like I said, super lightweight. The arms are actually only, are they 3 or 4 millimeter thick? Let me double check. I think they're 3 millimeters thick, but I just looked at it and it kind of looks like it might be 4 millimeters. The arms are, oh, look at that! 3.5 millimeters thick. Yeah, so the arms are pretty thin, but it's a Cinewoop. You're not thrashing on this thing, right? And so save weight wherever you can, because the lighter the lighter the rig is, the better it's going to change direction, the better runtime, the better flight characteristics, all the things, right? It's about building things to the right spec, not always the highest spec, right? Not the thickest arms, the widest arms are typically not the right choice. You want to build these things to be durable enough. And you also want to have some thought as to like when it breaks, because we can always hit these things hard enough to break them at some point. Where's it going to break, right? The bottom plate breaking is a nightmare. You have to take the entire thing apart to swap a bottom plate out. So make the arms the weak point, right? The arms are the easiest and quickest thing to replace, and so make them be the weak point. Also, when an arm breaks, it's going to like absorb a bunch of energy when it's breaking, and that'll soften the blow on everything else. And so, yeah, this has been such a phenomenon. Every single Cinesplore that I've pretty much ever built, that's not true. I've built a bunch of different ones, but every single Cinewhoop that I've flown professionally has been a Cinesplore. Also, this is the V1. This is the old school V1 Cinesplore. There is a V2, which has A-arm style arms, and it is significantly stronger. It is a little bit heavier. And so I actually kind of prefer the old school ones. I am going to do a V2 build at some point here. But I'm really not looking forward to the extra weight, because on a 2004 or 2104 motor at somewhere around, God, I forget what the other motors are. These are the T motors. These are 3000 kV, anywhere from like 3000 to 3500 kV. It's just right. If you start to make these things super heavy, you need a bigger motor, and then you need a bigger battery, and then you need a stronger frame, and it just kind of snowballs from there. So yeah, building these things to the right spec is you end up with something that's super dialed, a lot lighter than a squirt, a lot more durable than a squirt, and also a lot easier to work on. I've tipped so many people off to the Cinesplore, and like at least a dozen of them came from the squirt to the Cinesplore, and after flying it for a while would get back to me and be like, oh my God, like it just kind of does everything better. So yeah, all that being said, Cinewhoops are a pretty specific kind of tool, right? Like they're not necessarily like fun to fly unless you have a subject that you're chasing. So if you fly freestyle outside, I would probably not build a Cinewhoop. It's just not the right tool for the job, unless you have something that's like really cool looking around you that would make sense to fly something that goes 10 miles an hour super smooth. That's what this thing's going to do really well. The main thing it does is subject-driven flying around people, objects that go between 0 and, like, let's say 20, maybe 25 miles an hour. That's what it's going to do really well. In the chat, B. Kirk74 was first, Sporty was next, FizzPV, P Money, Jimmy. Man, I really wish that YouTube wasn't such a shit show. They're showing all of your like raw YouTube names, not your actual YouTube names, and sometimes they're insane. I'm pretty sure this is Jamie Flies FPV. Sporny. Oh, apparently it's not. That's super weird. Sorry. Jamie Harrell. And then Jamie Flies FPV. We got two Jamies in here tonight. Whoop Fox, Capital C, Flakadelic, Analog Boy in a Digital World. That's a funny screen name. Cole FPV, Capital C, Mike K, Life Behind Bars, FizzPV, Andrew Taylor, Dear, I'm so sorry for butchering this, but Dear Avid, I think that is. Denzel the Terrible, Frank Nicholas, FizzPV, Mike K. Oh, Jamie Flies, that was my mistake. Wrong account. Okay, cool. I was going to say, what are the chances that A, we have two females in here at the same time? That's incredibly rare. B, we have two Jamies in here at the same time. Jason Price, Bob Noxus. What's up, dude? How are you, brother? How you been? If you want to talk directly to me, just type CiottiFPV into your chat message. If you want to support me, go over to CiottiFPV.com. Patreon helps me out the most. Book a Fiverr session. You'll learn a lot. Buy something for my Etsy store. I have lots of really fun stuff. Lots of new stuff up there, too. Loads of affiliate links over there. Do the things, and we'll keep hanging out 4 times a week. Mike K says, how much for that? How much for what? FizzPV says, you hear the giveaway intro I sent you yet? I did not, man. I'm sorry. I'm incredibly behind. I'm like 3 days behind because between hurting my back on Sunday and then just this week has been just ridiculous. Danzilla the Terrible says, CiottiFPV gives good tips. Thank you, dude. He also says, I built the Cinesplore on CI's recommendation. It's a great little platform. Hell yeah, man. Mike K says, I have Fat Shark HD3s, and when I try to record video, it just beeps and the red light doesn't flash. When I hold it down, menu appears, but the picture looks really bad. Analog signal. Yeah, I don't have any Fat Sharks that record DVR anymore either. I don't know what the deal is, but I mean, in fairness, the DVR was always pretty awful on the Fat Sharks anyway, so when it stopped working altogether, I was like, okay, that's fine. Yeah, it's, I mean, you can literally contact Fat Shark. That's probably your only hope. They will get back to you. They probably won't have a solution, but they will get back to you. They're still around. Bob Noxious says, what's up? Denzel the Terrible says, what's your current favorite Cinesplore motor? I have the FPV Cycle 21mm. Is there better? FizzPV says it should give you a laugh. Awesome. Yeah, I had Bob was kind enough to do a run of his 2104s in a slightly higher KV for me and a bunch of folks a couple of years ago. And so I got a bunch of those. I only really use those on my heavier weight Cinesplores, though. I like to run the lightest possible 2004s, which are the Brother Hobby VYs, which are the motors that are on the Avada Killer, which I think is right there, being all flat. But those were okay when I had the Hero 8 on there, which is like 20-something grams lighter than the Hero 12. Once I went up to the Hero 12, those motors felt just sort of weak. These T-motors make more power than those. These are the T-motor 2004 3000s. And then those FPV Cycle 21mm motors make even more power. I have the FPV Cycle 21mm on the digital Cinesplore. Also, when I went to digital, they gained even more weight. And so the digital Hero 12 carrying Cinesplore has the FPV Cycle 21mm, and they're just perfect. And then the analog Cinesplore, which for the longest time was set up to carry the Hero 8, but then eventually I moved the Hero 12 mount onto it because I just stopped using the Hero 8. That thing is on Axis 2004s. I don't remember what the KV is. They are Axis Power 2004s that you can only get from Newbie Drone. And they are 3,500 kV. Is that the same as the T-motors? What did I say the T-motors were? No, the T-motors are 3,000s. With all of these motors, for 4S, these motors are all fairly low kV. But once you put the 5 blades, the D76s on, they wake right up. They don't really work all that well on tri-blades, although the Avada Killer is so lightweight that it's totally fine on tri-blades. But when you start picking up a GoPro Hero, you're going to go to 5 blades. If you're lifting that much weight on tri-blades, they start to get really, really, really noisy. What are the Brother Hobby VYs? What are these? KV, I don't remember. 3150. Okay, yeah, so 3150. Does T-Motor make a higher KV 2004? T-Motor 2004. They make 1700 and then they make 3000. Okay. Yeah, they claim that the 3000 kV is for 4 to 5S. But yeah, again, you put those 5 blades on, and even the lower 3000, 3100 kV, it starts to make some serious jam. Jimmy the Cow 2000 says, just got in the stream, saw that some places got the 04 Pro in stock. Did you get one? I didn't. I'm gonna wait a minute here because I already have a couple of the 04 Pros, and I don't know a frame. I'm going to we're gonna be doing an 04 Pro freestyle build, but I don't know a frame and I don't know the motors quite yet. So I'm just gonna give it a minute here, and yeah, we're gonna see what happens. I hope I don't regret this, but also a bunch of stuff kind of came up financially, and so it's a little rough right now for me, and so I kind of have to wait, if I'm totally honest. Whoop Fox says on PidSum from the other day, check my Hummingbird V4 bind and fly that's been hard to tune. Check the PidSum, yaw was at 1,000, so took that to 400, flies much better. I would check yours if you had not. I've checked a bunch of builds, and I've only found a couple that were cranked all the way up. Usually it's fine to have them all the way up at 1,000, but it really depends on so many different things. So, yeah, I'm glad that 400 is a little low. I would maybe move that up to like at least maybe 600 or so. But you know, whatever. I talked pretty in depth about it the other day. How you want to kind of like balance the PID sum with the actual PID sliders, the PID values that you're putting in. So hopefully that made sense. Sporty says, you've seen the Sora from Spider Cinematics yet? I have not. I don't know what... Sora is an AI thing, right? I don't know what Spider Cinematics is. Alright, let's get going. I'm going to move this chat over here so that I can see it a little bit better from the bench. And we are just going to start cooking. All right, so on the Cinesplore, these are the HQ port ducts that CiottiFPV sells. It helps to open up so I'm already probably like an hour or two into this, probably closer to an hour. It helps to open this area up here, especially if you want to run these arm LEDs, which are really, really, really nice. And so I've already opened these up. The other thing that you got to make sure, though, the arm LEDs are too wide to fit through here. So you got to make sure that the arm LEDs are back a little bit. You'll notice this one here does not have shrimp wrap on it. So when Drew sent this to me, it was exactly like you see here, but this guy also had shrink wrap on it, and the arm LED was a little bit farther forward, and it was actually too far forward. These two screw holes are what lines up with these two here, and it was interfering with this. So even after opening this up, and I've had to do this with all mine as well, even after opening this up, there was just no room for that. So what I've already done is cut down, what I had to do is cut down the shrink wrap at the motor here a little bit to shorten up these wires, and then I cut these wires shorter and resoldered this down. It's an easy thing to kind of troubleshoot. You put the motors on, you put this on, and then you just slap this on here, and you see if you can get the screw holes to kind of line up. And I think that there's one of these that's going to be really close. You also want to make sure that this is able to sit flat on here, right? So this one's totally fine. I think this one is fine as well. Yep, that's sitting flat, and we can move it forward just enough. This one might be a problem here, though. This one is obviously fine because I took all the time to kind of fix it and get this set back up. But this one, as you can see, like the arm LED is just kind of, I think it's a little too far forward there. Let me just take a look, though. And so, like, you can kind of tell, like, I move it forward and it just stops. And you can see it hitting the arm LED. So that's where it stops. Yeah, I'm going to have to redo this one. It's just, they just won't quite line up. I could probably just, like, smash it forward, but that's not going to be good. So let's get started with that. and I'll have to do a little bit of soldering, and yeah, I'll give you some good soldering tips. Let's turn on the Weller 1010 over here. Joshua Bardwell's website, FPV Know-It-All, has some really good soldering iron recommendations. I have a Weller 1010. It's a little more expensive than the Hacko. It's really not any better. Excuse me, it's not any better. But Weller is like an old school soldering iron company. My dad had one when I was growing up. And so it's got like a cool nostalgia to it. And so when it was time for me to step it up from a kind of super beginner soldering iron that I had for the first few years, I decided that it was worth a couple extra dollars to get this Weller 1010 set up. It's a really cool blue color. And I mean, it has been like unbelievably reliable, and it has just worked for probably like 8 years now. And just a week or two ago, I finally changed the tip out. So it's had the same soldering iron tip for those like 8 years. Sporny says it's a new frame by the dudes who made the Itsy frame. Ah, interesting. 3.5 inch. Why? Why 3.5? That's odd. What is it? What's it meant to carry? At 3.5 inches, what's it meant to carry? I guess a full-size GoPro? Interesting. I actually like that. I like that. Well, I don't know why they would do a 3.5 inch, but I like that somebody else is making like what I guess sounds like a proper Cinewoop frame. That's pretty cool because, like I said, I haven't seen a proper Cinewoop frame in a long time, in way too long. But luckily, the Cinesplores are still around. You can still get them, so you know. We don't always have to have a bunch of different options. You can probably get those old school Cinewoop frames. You can probably still get squirts, but don't. The Cinesplore is definitely better. So, Drew soldered this arm LED as close as he possibly could to the motor here without removing some of this shrink wrap. And I would have done this exact same thing. But yeah, it's not quite far enough in there. So what we need to do is actually cut off a little bit of this shrink wrap here at the motor that the factory has installed, which is a little bit sketchy because like you've got the winding the winding wire that a lot of times will terminate up in here and be connected to the actual motor wires. And so don't cut this factory installed shrink wrap unless you absolutely have to. In this case, I have to, and so I'm just going to cut as little of it as I possibly can. The way that I usually do that is just with a little X-Acto knife. And so I'm going to cut like just 2 millimeters or so, and I'm going to be super gentle here with this X-Acto knife. And I'm more just kind of like scoring this than anything else. I don't want to cut all the way through it because I don't want to get to the wire. And so just kind of scoring that so that I can hopefully now come in with something else and remove it. Well, all right, so I'm just going to come in at an angle with this guy, with these flush cutters, and yeah, all right, well, I tried, but this is going to be fine. Yeah, we're good. This is pretty thick. Every different motor manufacturer uses slightly different shrink wrap. This ended up being pretty thick shrink wrap, and scoring it didn't really do much. Give that a shot first and see if you can like dig your fingernails into it and just yank it off of there. If that doesn't work, just come in with your flush cutters. Come in at a little bit of an angle and then just little tiny cuts. Just nibble away at it. Nibble, 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 nibble. All right, and that should be enough. And there we go. We've exposed just a little bit more wire Clean it up a little bit here. Hit it with the lighter real quick. And all right, good to go. You'd never even know that we did that. And yeah, I just removed that little amount. Cool. So now we've got to desolder this. We're going to cut these a little bit shorter and we're going to resolder. This is flux paste. They sell this everywhere. Get you some. Get it in a syringe. The syringe is going to put this exactly where it needs to go and nowhere that it doesn't need to go. The fact that it is flux paste, it will sit on top of the joint. The other thing a lot of people get are flux pens. Those have liquid flux in them. When you put it on the joint, it flows everywhere. With the flux paste, I can put a blob of that paste on top of here. Look, I got new Yocto Soons. Because my old one's broke, and they've changed the design. They now have a built-in LiPo and a little push button instead of a switch. So I got a fresh new set of nerd goggles. All right, so soldering tips. Use flux every single time. Clean your soldering iron when you take it out of the soldering station, not when you put it back in there. If the tip is all covered in solder and you put it in the station, in the holder rather, and you turn it off, that solder is going to prevent the tip itself from oxidizing. When you take it out of the stand, that's when you want to clean it though, to get the oxidization off. The oxidization starts immediately. It happens constantly that the soldering iron is on. You're going to put this flat part of your hand down so that you can hold this soldering iron nice and flat. You can even roll your hand over like this, and what I can do here is hit all three of these solder joints at once. Rock this back and forth a little bit, and then I can pull everything off all at once. All right? A lot of times when you do that, you'll bridge the solder joints. If that happens, just hit the two solder joints that are bridged and flick outwards, and that will unbridge the solder joints very quickly and very easily. Cool? That's going to save you a little bit of time, and every little bit of time that you save here is going to really help speed these builds up. Also, there's just kind of no way to do it otherwise. If you do it otherwise, you got to like pull one wire off and then pull another wire off and then pull another wire off. Take advantage of being able to do that all at once. Take a quick look at your wires, make sure they're all good. In this case, I need to cut these guys down, and so I want to give myself a little bit of room here, so I'm not going to go bananas. Like, it was pretty damn close, so I don't really need to go nuts here. Make sure they're all lined up and cut straight across. And so I'm going to do as little as I possibly can. That is the minimum that I can remove. Never cut more than you need to, because if you ever need to work on this again, right, you want to have a little bit extra. So cut the absolute minimum possible. You can either do this with your fingernails if you don't bite your fingernails off like a lunatic like me, or you can do it with flush cutters. If you're going to do it with flush cutters, be very, very gentle. Just think of it like you're denting the silicone, and then grab the wire here and very loosely grab that little end bit and yank it off. It's way safer to do this with your fingernails. You can both dent the silicone and yank it off with your fingernails. Never, ever, ever hold the motor like this and go yanking on the wires. You will pull the you'll pull the proper wire right off of the right off the base of the motor, basically. So we got one. Also, don't strip off a ton of this insulation. You really only need to strip off a little bit of insulation, especially if you're using arm LEDs like we are in this case. There's another one. And last one. And try to strip off the same amount from each one. That probably goes without saying. All right, pinch it, yoink it. And there we go. Just that simple. If you really want to double check yourself, those little bits that you remove, look inside of them and see if you accidentally nicked and cut off any individual strands of wire. In this case, I'm cutting this super short, so I didn't bother because I can't really cut these down anymore. Also, I've done this probably thousands of times by now, so I can tell if I screwed it up, basically. All right, so now what we're going to do is take our lack of a fingernail and push down on the silicone. When you pull that silicone off, it stretches this insulation out a little bit. So push the insulation down and you'll get a little bit more exposed wire. Also, as soon as you hit these things with heat, that's going to happen anyway. You don't want that to happen when it's on the pad. We'll talk about why in a minute. Now I'm going to take these three and just kind of separate them a little bit. I'm going to do that with these sharp-tipped tweezers so I can get down here at the base. So just give yourself a little bit of room to work with. Spread the wires out. And make sure there's no rogue little strands of wire trying to escape. Make sure they're all bundled together. You can twist them. Doesn't really make much of a difference, though. I just kind of pinch and pull to make sure that they're making one nice little bundle. All right, that looks pretty good, but I do want to just pull this wire off the side again. All right, cool. So we got all three separated like that. Now we're going to tin these wires. You do not want to be adding solder to the joint while you're trying to connect the wire with the solder joint. And so you need to tin your wires. You also need to tin the pads. We'll talk about that in a second. So put the motor somewhere that you can easily get a soldering iron on one side of the wire and solder on the other side of the wire. So I'm going to turn this thing sideways like this. I'm going to come in with the solder. Think about where the solder balls are going to go. And so we're going to put this at an angle so that the solder balls will go down. They won't drop into the motor itself. I've got a little tiny bit of solder left here that we're probably just going to use in the next couple of minutes. Take the soldering iron out of the stand, right into the brass steel wool to clean it. You're going to put the soldering iron on one side of the wire. You're going to feed the solder into the other side of the wire. You're trying to push the solder in between the individual strands of wire. Good to go. After you do the first one, you're going to have a blob on the tip of the iron. That's going to make the second and third ones a lot easier. That's it. Now, let's just make sure this one. You got to give it a second. You got to make sure the heat transfers into the wire. Otherwise, it won't. Both the first one and the second one are being a little stubborn. I think I was going a little too fast. What actually really does help with this is if you flux them. Take your flux pen. I should have done this beforehand. And with flux syringe, and you can literally just put the little bit of wire down the spout of the flux syringe, and it'll put a little bit of flux on the wires themselves. I'm now doing it after. That's cool too. I wish I'd done it before, but yeah, you can add flux before every single step if you want your life to be basically a lot easier. Flux will just make everything that you do a lot quicker and a lot simpler, and it'll make the end result a lot better. So just always use flux all the time, forever. Except when you're soldering onto 0702 motors, because the flux can kind of like spread out and make bad things happen. Basically, if it gets in between the C-clip and the motor bearings, bad things can happen. Jamie Flies FPV asks a great question. Will ARM LEDs mess with the camera lighting? Not at all. I've run ARM LEDs on pretty much everything I've built in the last 5 or 6 years, and I've never had an issue. It's because they shoot straight up, and they're well. If you had a rig that had props in view, then yes, it could actually mess with the camera lighting. But I've actually never had that experience ever either, because they're kind of so far inboard and they're not that bright. So I put flux onto the wires, so I'm not going to put flux onto the pads of this. These pads are all already tinned. There's a blob of solder on each one. And then I've got my flux on the wires themselves, so we're good to go. If I hadn't put flux on the wires, I would put it on top of these pads like you saw me do when I removed this. Also, this still has some flux residue on it from when I removed the wires. Soldering iron comes out of the stand and directly into the brass steel wool to be cleaned. And now we're going to go from the farthest away to the closest. And I'm not going to bring the soldering iron in until the wire is in the perfect spot. You do not want to use the soldering iron to move the wires around. The soldering iron tip is there to provide heat, not to move the wires around. Your left hand is what you need to use to get the wires into the correct position. After I've done one, I'll rotate the motor around a little bit like this, so that the second one isn't like a little bit farther away, and then the third one is too far away. And there's kind of a specific way of doing this. I'm going to show you once it's done. That looks good. You do want to push down a little bit with the tip of the soldering iron to flatten the bundle of wires out. The flatter the little bundle of wires is on the pad, the stronger it's going to be, and the bigger sort of contact patch that you're going to get. The middle and closest ones look really nice. The farthest away one needs to get adjusted a little bit. So I'm going to come up here at an angle, reflow this, rework this, and just pull this wire out ever so slightly, and now all three look perfect. And so let me show you what I mean when I say there's kind of like a specific way of doing this. You basically want to hang the silicone off the side of the PCB just enough so that you have something that looks like this. See how the silicone butts right up against the PCB? That's what you want. You don't want like a millimeter or two of exposed wire and then the silicone. If you were to do that, that exposed wire is where it would bend, and it would bend and break an individual strand, bend and break another strand, bend and break a strand. Drew soldered these on the other side, and he got it almost perfect. But see, he's got the silicone a little bit up over on top of the pad. I would much rather have that than have it the other way, where there's a bunch of exposed wire hanging off. And so the way that he has this is actually totally fine. It's not quite as good, but this is a Cinewoop. We're not going to be breaking arms. I'm not going to rework that. If this were a freestyle rig, I would rework that, and I would pull those wires just off the pad a little bit so that, like, on the left side here, you see the difference, right? Like, think about if this is a rig where arms were going to break all the time. Think about a pulling force on these wires. These three here, if this wire gets pulled, this copper pad is glued to the PCB. So if this wire gets pulled, it's going to try to pull that copper pad straight to the left, and it's going to be really strong in that direction. Over here, if these wires get pulled, they're going to try to kind of cantilever up a little bit, and they're going to try to sort of peel that pad off. Again, this is not a rig that's going to get crashed, and so I'm not going to go in there and rework that. You don't want to rework stuff unless you absolutely have to. Every single time you put heat into any of this work, the adhesive that holds the pads on loosens up a little bit. So, like, like I said, if he had it to where, like, there was a bunch of like, if this is the silicone, and then this is the exposed wire, and now this is the pad that you're soldering it to. If he had it like this, where there was a bunch of that exposed wire, I would absolutely redo that. But he's actually got it like this, and in this case, we're completely fine with that. So this is now good to go. We shortened this up a little bit, and so now we can throw it back on here, and away we shall go. Drew's solder joints are nice and shiny, nice and round. He knows what he's doing. I think during one of our Fiverr sessions, we talked about soldering. Maybe not. He might have just known how to solder. The little trick of hanging the silicone off the side like that, I've actually never heard anybody talk about that or recommend that. That's like kind of just me. And I got that from having a lot of wires break in exactly that spot. And when I stopped doing that and I started to set it up like the way that you saw me do it just now, that stopped happening. So, you know, and look, like I used to ask my dad all the time, like, to look at my soldering and like give me feedback and tell me what I'm doing right, tell me what I'm doing wrong. And eventually he just said to me, like, look, you're doing this and you're paying attention to how they crash and where they fail. Like, you know more than me in this scenario. Like, I'm not the guy to ask here. You're actually the guy to ask here because you've got all the sort of knowledge and feedback from having built these for years and years and years. And so, yeah, even though, you know, NASA maybe doesn't say to do it this way, NASA's not building quads that smash into brick walls at 180,000 miles an hour. Well, no, actually, they are building stuff that goes 180,000 miles an hour. But you know what I'm saying. Let me just check these other guys real quick. I forgot to put shrink wrap on there, which is kind of annoying. Yeah, no, the rest of these joints look fantastic. Yeah, I forgot to put shrimp wrap on both of these. But actually, I'm going to take these motors off because I find that it's easier to do builds from the middle out, basically. ESC, flight controller, video system, receiver, anything else that you're putting in the middle of the quad first, and then motors and motor wires last. And one of the main reasons is that, like, having these motors and having all these janky wires all over the place, it just kind of gets in the way. Like, if you just put together the center of the canopy and you just do all that work in the middle, it's a little bit less gratifying. Like, it always feels so good to get the motors done, and it's just like, oh, I'm almost done. But yeah, from like a ease of working on these things standpoint, if you go from the middle out, also I find that like building them from the middle out, it helps me to remember to like fire it up to make sure that the video system is working and the receiver is working before I put it all the way together and then realize that like I have them on a weird UART or there's something else stupid going on. So yeah, that's the way I've been building the past couple years, is like kind of this middle out approach, kind of like Silicon Valley, right? If you haven't watched the show, they design a compression algorithm that works from the middle out, basically, and so they say middle out a lot. So this is how we want to do. Even better, if you can, take the arms off. This frame, it doesn't force you to have the arms in, but without the arms on, it gets a little bit rattly because of the way that this is a pretty unique frame. It's got the full base plate is all the way on the bottom here, front to back, but then it's got this little center pad here where your 20 by 20 both 20 by 20 stacks sit on this middle pad. So if I remove these arms, I think it becomes a little bit clackety and wobbly. Also, these screws are already tightened up. I try to not loosen and tighten screws unless I absolutely have to, because eventually they wear out. So having the arms in here is not that much of a pain in the ass. We will leave them, and it will be fine. Oh, wow, look. You guys are typing CiottiFPV without the at, and it's not... Wow. Yet again, YouTube has made things significantly worse. So apparently now you have to put the at in front of somebody's name if you want it to light up an orange. That's really dumb. Man, I wish they would, like, just maybe one time, I wish they would make things better rather than making them worse. That is unbelievable. Yeah, okay. So you gotta at me. Cole FPV says, your dad had the soldering experience. You have the experience of doing all the crashing. Did your dad get good scrub a long time ago? Oh my God, yeah, dude. My dad, when he started, well, so I think he started soldering when he was in the Navy in like his 20s. And then he worked for a high-end audio company. And then eventually he worked for Princeton Plasma Physics Lab, who had the tokamak fusion reactor, and he literally did soldering work on that thing. And at some point, so Princeton Plasma Physics Lab is PPPL. At some point, PPPL sent him to literal NASA soldering school. And I think he said it was a week-long soldering school that he went through. And they taught him how they solder, and it's crazy. They do stuff like they will tin a pad, and then they will remove all of the solder that they possibly can from that pad, and then they will retin the pad on everything. So they tin, they remove, they retin, and then they move forward, just to make sure that the entire pad gets as much solder on it as possible. Stuff like that is what, really separates the lunatics from us normies. But, if you're going to send something to space, you might as well make it hopefully work for years and years and years. And that's another thing that that my dad told me is like, look, you guys build these things and then you smash the shit out of them and you rework them, and like, you're not building these things to last 100 years. Like, there's certain things that you don't need to do. Like, don't waste your time doing certain things, because in 100 years you're not going to be using this. The tech is going to be all different. And so, yeah, you got to be kind of realistic sometimes and cut the right corners. I'm not big on cutting corners unless it's totally pointless, right? Like, if you're going the extra mile to do something that legitimately doesn't matter, that is an actual waste of time. It's hard to draw that line. It's hard to know where the line is, right? Like, there's certain stuff that, like, it might make 1% of a difference. And that's kind of up to you to kind of figure out if you want to put the extra time into that stuff. If you're flying for fun and you're not flying in, like, mission critical environments, you can cut more corners. If you're going to be flying something over people or for money, you should cut less corners. Because, yeah, if you have shit that's falling out of the sky all the time, you're never going to get any more gigs. You could even argue that if you have shit that falls out of the sky once, you're not going to get any more gigs. But, it really does depend. So, here's the inside of the Cinesplore. 3 sets of standoffs. You've got a set of 20 by 20 holes here. This is the front of the frame. The front of the frame is a little bit longer for the camera to push the camera farther forward. And then a rear set of 20 by 20s for your digital video system. Or any video system. There are press nuts here. M2 press nuts in the middle, M3 press nuts on the outside. So you have to make sure that you lift all of your electronics up enough to cover these press nuts, and to cover however much screw is going to come through the press nut. That's another reason to leave the arms on in this build when you do this, because with the arms on, you'll get to see how much thread is poking through. Since I didn't put this frame together, this is a good time to crank these to make sure that all of the thread that's going to peek through is peeking through. It looks like Drew did tighten these up enough. So that's good. Those are the M2s. Those are the M3s, rather. Here are the M2s. Yep, these are fine. This is the hardware that FPV Cycle sends with it. Obviously, it's the right hardware. It's the right lengths. So we're good. But if you ever replace any of this hardware, be really aware of that. If you run hardware that's too long, you can drive it right up into your electronics. So let's do the stack first. Drew and I had a Fiverr session, a build planning Fiverr session, where we went through the whole build, and I recommended this. This was going back like a year or two ago, before Captain Dickhead ruined everything in the U.S. And so back then, this stack was probably half as much money as it was here. So this is actually like an ultra bargain, very inexpensive Cinesplore build, all things considered. This is the T-Motor 45 amp mini F7 stack. I've had really good luck with this stack. M. Tyler 2469 says, yeah, figured that out. Building drones too. Never had to worry about the stresses of crashing 10,000 times before either. It validated my findings when you talked about that. Jimmy the Cow says, love when your dad comes on the stream. He's so happy and fun and makes you light up. He's smart as hell and seems great. He really is, man. I'm super lucky. Both my parents are just incredible. I'm incredibly fortunate to have been born into such an amazing family, where, you know, my parents stayed together my whole life. They sacrificed so much for the good of me. They left a hell of an impact on me, and I try my best to you know, emulate even just 10% of that with Maggie's kids, and hopefully I do. But yeah, they left some big shoes to fill, but in a really good way. All right, so most flight controllers or ESCs or stacks are going to come with a bunch of rubber grommets. There's no specific reason that you have to run these. Like, if you hate the color yellow, you can absolutely buy some different color of rubber grommet and run those. There's nothing like specific. What I will say is that different rubber grommets are slightly different durometers, different hardnesses. If you want to go all the way down the rabbit hole, you can certainly test a bunch of different hardnesses and see which ones perform the best. I've never gone that hard. I've never really had like a grommet that's too soft or too hard. This is kind of cool. The T-Motor stack comes with little short ones here, and then they come with ones that are longer on one side than the other. Let's take a quick look at, and then they come with these clear plastic spacers, which are pretty slick as well. It comes with long M3 hardware. The Cinesplore frame is drilled for M2. So I'm not going to use the hardware that they included. I'm going to pull from my stash a bunch of M2 hardware for this. I feel like I might have missed a comment or two. Sporny says it's not a Cinewoop. I haven't seen one with action cam yet. I think fast cinematics is what it's built for. Looks sexy though. Okay. Talking about the guys that make the Itsy frame. Interesting. Fast cinematics. Okay. I'm confused by the 3.5-inch prop selection, because I don't really know of any cameras that are heavy enough to really need that. Maybe they did it for efficiency. That's an interesting choice. So yeah, I'm not really going to use these. So I want to try to figure out if I'm going to, and for the record, to do a proper build, it's not just smashing things together and like spending all your time soldering. It's doing a lot of what we're about to do. What I'm about to do is what makes a good build into a great build. And it's just like paying attention to all the little details. And so the detail that I'm looking at right now is, am I going to use this or this grommet on the ESC or the flight controller? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the ESC and I'm just going to kind of put it in here roughly where it's going to go. And I'm going to see how much clearance there is, how much clearance I need on the bottom of this thing. I also need to start thinking about what the hell I'm going to do about this capacitor. I really wish they hadn't put this capacitor on from the factory. So if I put the capacitor rearwards like this, it does fit in between these standoffs, but it takes up the space where the digital VTX needs to go. And so it's not going to work putting it backwards. A lot of times I'll put them facing forwards, which actually works really well on Cinewhoops, but it's so long that there's going to be nowhere for the camera to go. What I might be able to do is push it down a little bit and run it under the camera. Well, while I'm here, we might as well take a quick look at that. So here is the, I'm going to just call it the Vista. It's actually the RunCam version of it, whatever the hell RunCam calls it, but it's a Vista. Here's this guy. And so we don't care about this. What we care about is this camera. So here's the camera that we're using. This is the RunCam Phoenix HD. So let's just hold this kind of loosely here, as low as it'll go. And then I'm going to hold this thing sideways, and I'm going to see if we'll have enough room, and we will not. So even with this camera pushing in to the, at 0 up tilt, I guess it'll kind of work. Well, now we might be able to get this to work. Let's take a look. Do I have a little bit of... Let's see. Can I just bend this down just a little bit? Being super, super, super gentle with this. These legs on these capacitors are extremely fragile. Never, never, never push on these capacitors with any amount of force. You will break these legs right the hell off. So yeah, I was able to just push that down just a little bit. Let's put it on here and see. So this is as low as the ESC could possibly go. And then if I hold this camera up here, yeah, we can make this work. I've done this on a couple, I've done this same little setup here on a couple different Cinewhoops. Although no, that's actually not going to work. So look at the top of the camera in relation to the top of the standoffs. And so like, if this was at 0 up tilt, we would be fine. All right, get this at just the right angle. So that's just the right angle there. But as soon as we add up tilt, see the camera is starting to take up the space that the top plate is going to need to be in. So that's not going to work. What I might be able to do is take this capacitor off, put a different, well, I guess I could solder it to the bottom of this thing. So let's do this. We're going to put this capacitor as low as it'll go. All right, so I'm going to put the capacitor completely flat on the base plate like this. And now I'm going to do the same thing with the camera. And I'm not going to show you guys this because I need to actually look at this. That's really not going to work either. The other thing you want to check is how the camera is going to kind of sit in with the top plate. Some top plates will have like a big deep cutout. Sorry. Some top plates will have a big deep cutout in them, and the top of the camera can actually like peek through a little bit. This is not the case here. And so the real way to do this is actually just hold this top plate on here, hold the obstruction on the bottom there, and then you can literally just push up, just start to give the camera up tilt, and I can only get like maybe 5 degrees of up tilt on this camera before it hits the top plate, and that's just obviously nowhere near. I mean, for a Cinewhoop that might be enough, but don't do that. Don't force yourself to only be able to have 10 mil of up tilt. So that sucks. That's super annoying that T-Motor hard mounted. I mean, they didn't hard mount it. They just soldered it. But yeah, these are annoying to get off of here. So yeah, that's kind of silly. All right, well, I might as well remove it. Hold on. Let me get the soldering iron fired back up. It has to come off, and it's kind of making figuring out how high I want to mount this a pain in the ass. So let's just get it off of here now. Soldering iron's already on. So all right, we're gonna OmniFixo this. If you hold it in 3 different spots, it won't have anywhere to go. It'll be nice and solid. And so they've got these tiny little solder points here on the inside of the pads that I'm going to have to get to. So we're going to bring our flux in here. And just put a little bit of it on these guys. And so the reason why this is annoying is that I'm going to heat one of these up, and then like I'm going to have to try to rotate this thing out, and it kind of never wants to come out of there. And these little solder points for this capacitor are so close that I can't get the soldering iron onto both of them. So let's just see. We're going to hit this one. Wait for it to flow. And now this is a big boy ESC, so it's a massive heat sink. And so that didn't even leave a dent. Let me tin the tip of the soldering iron so that we have a bigger contact patch here for the heat to transfer. And now we'll try again. There we go. Now it's starting to flow. And so now I'm probably going to have to go back and forth because I don't think I'm going to be able to twist this thing all the way off. I might have gotten a little bit of movement there. Let's go to this side. T-Motor did not always put this on here. I don't think I've ever actually seen this stack with the capacitor pre-installed like this. This is kind of silly. There we go. That one moved a little bit. Now this one I need you to move. Come on. This one on the left side is obviously the ground pad because it's being way more stubborn. I have my soldering iron at 710, which is pretty hot. The capacitor is starting to get really hot. There we go. The positive one keeps moving, but the negative one is being a real son of a bitch. Come on, buddy. Yeah, there we go. Yes. Got it. All right. That wasn't too bad. But now the capacitor is kind of boogered up. Like it's all mangled. And the bigger problem is these little legs on this capacitor are like infinitely short. And so this capacitor like is kind of garbage now. I might be able to get these legs straightened out. They also kind of pre-bent these legs, and I don't really love that. A lot of times, like, you bend these legs once, and that's kind of it. Let's see what happens, though. I'm going to try to bend them back straight. Yeah. Come on now. Yeah, I'm not going to trust it. I really don't like bending these legs and then bending them back. I've had these legs break before, and when the legs on a capacitor break and then the capacitor vibrates away and then vibrates back, it can make your ESC turn off and on, and your shit falls out of the sky. So what I'm gonna do, I think, is put a smaller capacitor on here. that I can fit under the camera, because with the Cinesplore frame, there's really not a great spot for the capacitor. You can put a capacitor in between here, but you would have to put it in there sideways, and not many of them fit in there. The Cinesplore is a tight frame. The reason why it's so lightweight and it flies so good is because it's a small frame. And it's super compact. Luckily, on 4S, you actually don't need a capacitor. But you can take one of these tiny little guys. Let's make sure it's a high enough voltage. And this is not. This is only a 25 volt. Technically, a 25 volt should be okay for 4S, but if Drew ever hooked up a 6S battery, this thing would just explode, and we don't want that. So, in my opinion, always put 35 volt capacitors on, just in case someday. I mean, I guess unless it's an ESC that only takes 4S, and then if you hook up a 6S battery, the ESC is going to explode, and you won't really care about the fact that the capacitor just exploded as well. Let's see. That's a 25 volt. Oh, buddy, come on. Tell me I've got a small 35 volt capacitor, please. What are you? Another 25? Shit sticks. We might be going capacitorless on this build, which again should be totally fine. I've done that quite a few times. Here we go. Here's a little 35 volt, 220 UF. And yeah, basically the same size as that one. Cool. All right, so we're good. We'll be able to get a capacitor in here. And I'm going to try to put it in that same spot, but I'm going to put it on the other side, I think, so that it sits lower. And it is going to sit down below the camera. That is like one of the best spots to put a capacitor in this frame. You can also put it in the back here, but then you have to run leads all the way from the ESC here all the way into the back. If you put the thing down here in the front, you can actually connect it directly to the ESC. And so that is what we're going to do. Let me take these guys off of here. Oh man, those are properly shrimp wrapped on there. I didn't do this. This came with these legs shrink wrapped like this. Kind of nice. But I don't want it right now. Alright, so these holes have solder in them. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove that solder. We're going to do that with solder braid. So we're going to come in here and we are going to flux these holes again. 1 and 2. Actually, sorry, this is solder wick. Solder wick. And this is going to just absorb and pull solder out of through holes. It's really, really, really nice stuff. And it's very, very gentle. Much more gentle than using a solder sucker. 710 degrees. Here we go. And just like that. 1 and 2. All right. It pulled the bunch out, but not quite enough. Let's hit it again. There we go. Sometimes you have to kind of angle the tip of the soldering iron into the hole. What makes this more difficult is that these holes are filled with lead-free solder, which sucks a big bag of dicks. So this is going to be harder because of that. And so let's hit this with just a little bit more flux. And we're going to hit the wick with... The wick does have some flux powder inside of it, but I find adding a little bit more really does help when you're dealing with lead-free solder. So just get it on there and then just look for the solder wick to turn silver. Oh, balls, come on now. Let me guess, this is going to be a pain in my ass. Let's go to the other side and see if we can pull it through from that side. All right, let's see if this is a little better over here. Flux. Okay. And I'm going to use the same little piece of wick because it didn't really pull any solder up that time. There we go. Come on, baby. Now this lead-free solder is up in there. So, believe it or not, we are going to add solder. What we are going to do is try to mix leaded solder with lead-free solder, and then pull it all out at the same time. And so we're just going to try to like push some of this leaded solder down into there. One and then the other. And then we're going to flip it over and do the same thing on the bottom. All right. Here we go. So we've got a hole there. Okay. A little more here. All right, and now let's see if that's any better. It's going to look better initially because it's going to grab that leaded solder right away. Oh yeah, cleared that right out. Hell yeah. That was the positive pad. That was the easier one. This is the ground pad, which is going to be more of a bastard. That's already fighting me even worse. Come on now. Shit. All right, we're going to do it again. Okay, where's that little piece of solder here? All right. Just push it down in there. Just mash it down in there. A little bit. I really want to turn this over, but let's just try that real quick. Maybe that's all we needed. Okay, solder wick. Get it on there. Come on, baby, clear out of there. Be really careful with this solder wick. Don't get it onto the components that are sitting right next door. You don't want to remove the solder from those. And that didn't do anything, so we got to go on this other side here and start working it. All right, so the ground pad is the one on my right now. So it's already got a bunch of solder in the top here. So let's cut this. And we're going to add some flux because we are just desperately trying to get this heat to transfer. I could turn the soldering iron up a little bit, but 710 is already pretty goddamn hot. And so I don't really want to go any farther with the soldering iron temperature. We're going to clean the tip of the soldering iron, and we're going to go back in and see if we can clear it out from the top. It's going to pull a bunch of solder because there's a big blob up on top here. No, it's not penetrating down through. Come on, buddy. Get that bullshit leaded solder out of there. All right, I don't want to stay on it any longer than that. Oh, yeah, it's still all clogged up. Let's add a little bit more. Add it again. Just always make sure you're using a part of the wick that's copper colored. Once it turns silver from pulling solder up, it's not going to do as good of a job. Try it again. This is hard. Sometimes you actually have to drill these out. Super annoying, man. I find a lot of times that like angling the tip of the soldering iron like this, it really gets some of the heat down in there, and it can help. I could also go to a thicker soldering iron tip, but I don't know. This is small work. Like, we're doing small work here. All right, so it is just not clearing out of there. What I'm gonna try is to actually ram this. We've got some extra long leg on this capacitor. I'm gonna try to get this hot and then just ram this guy through here. And I'm hoping that the leaded solder will stick to the leg of the capacitor. Let's see what happens. Oh boy, not a good sign. Let me add a little bit of leaded solder here. A solder sucker really wouldn't do anything in this case because this leaded solder is just not flowing. All right, so let's see what we can do here. Jesus. Whoop. That might be it. Yeah, buddy. There we go. Okay. All right, so there it is. Cool. All right, take some of that shit with you, please. All right, so I put it through, and now I'm going to take it out. Yeah, there we go. All right, cool. So now we're going to come back in with the wick. Now that the lead-free solder has been pushed out of the inside of the through hole, we should be able to remove it. It's weird, man. It gets like buried in the middle of the through hole, and like it just won't let go. It won't flow in there. It's pretty frustrating. All right, here we go. So, nice fresh solder wick. No flux, but let's just see real quick. Again, there is flux in the interior of the solder wick. Nah, we need more. Flux there, and I'm going to put some on here as well. Okay. Flux keeps everything clean, and it aids with the heat transfer. It makes the heat transfer happen a lot more quickly and just a lot better, basically. All right, that's looking pretty good. Let me just do this one more time. I got just the tiniest little bit of solder left here. Let's just put it right there. A little bit of heat into it. And let's hit it with the wick one more time. All right. Here we go now. I'm gonna heat this up just for a split second with the tip of the soldering iron. This is also going to pick up a little bit of solder on the tip of the iron. And then I'm going to bring the wick in. And I can watch, it's pulling up some of the solder there. Be patient. And now we're good. Hell yeah. On this positive side here, the bottom of the hole got cleared out, but the top of the hole is not totally cleared out. So let's just get that done. And perfect. Cool. So there we go. In theory, both of these holes should be cleared out now. Yep, there's one leg. There's the other leg. So holes are cleared out. Now we can finally move forward and get this guy, this capacitor soldered on here. So this this ESC has battery. Ooh, it's hot. has battery pads on one side and then no battery pads on the other side. Also, this plug header is on this side. So basically, this side of the ESC has the big chonky plug header and no battery pads. That just straight up means you're going to mount this like this. You're going to mount this ESC with this guy facing downwards so that you don't have to clearance this with the flight controller, but also you would not want your battery pads facing into the carbon. That's a terrible idea. So it's going to sit in the frame like this. I'm going to orient it so that the battery pads are going forwards, and we're going to put this capacitor off the bottom of this thing. The way that they had this capacitor soldered on is that it was coming off the top, and that's why it was sitting so high. I'm going to send it off the bottom here, and that's going to let it sit really flat on this bottom plate here to give the camera enough room to be up above it. Cool? So that's what we're going to do real quick. Omni fix O. And so we're going to come up from the bottom. On these capacitors, they're going to have a silver or gold stripe on one side. That's the ground. It actually has little minuses kind of written in there. And so that's the ground side. I don't need these legs to be this long. It's going to be kind of annoying with them being this long. So let's just chop them off here. And so we're going to come up from the bottom, negative with negative. So it's going to come up like this. And come on now. There we go. All right. So I'm going to kind of like pre-bend this, but I'm not going to bend it as tight as they had it, because it's just super annoying. When you bend these, I like to bend them from like the body so that they don't kink the little legs. This way they'll bend the legs kind of gradually so that there's not like one spot on the legs that's taking all of that sort of bending force, I guess you could say. All right, and so it's like that. And so like what you want is the bend to be gradual. See how it's not like a kink. It's not a kinky bend. It's kind of like a gradual bend. That's going to make the legs last a little bit longer. And so put this back on here. And that is looking pretty damn good. I think that's about where I want it. And so we can kind of let it sag down there a little bit. And we're going to kind of like, we're going to almost like tack it into place real quick here. So I need some more solder. Where are you at, spool? There we go. Okay. Take your big long piece of solder, take your screwdriver, wrap it around the handle. And now, what'd you come running over for, doggo? You think the solder is like a fucking dog treat or something? Wrap it up like that, squish it together like this, make a 90-degree angle, and now you've got a little thing where your solder will stand. It's a little too long right now, but now your solder will stand on your desk, and if you need to pick up a little bit of solder with the tip of the iron, it'll be standing here. You just take the tip of the iron and boop, and you can pick up a little solder super easily. This is a bit much here. Okay. So I'm sort of just going to tack this guy into place to kind of get started. And then we can come back in real quick and get it exactly where it needs to be. So, yeah. All right, so we want that like that. There we go. Okay, so just super quick. let's just put a little bit of, just going to tin the tip of the iron, hold this thing in place, and just drop that on there. Cool. One. Well, didn't have quite enough on there. There we go. All right. So that's going to keep it in place just for the time being. And now I can just kind of take another sort of look at it and make sure it's not too low. And that's looking absolutely perfect. So that's looking good. Now I'm going to tin these pads and get this thing totally done all at once. So we're going to come in with flux. Now these are the battery pads that we're tinning. So they are going to require more heat and more patience. I'm not going to turn the temperature of the iron up. 710 is a good number. I'm just going to be a little bit more patient on these pads. And so we are going to lay that again. I'm going to put my hand nice and flat here, and I'm going to get the tip of the soldering iron as flat to this pad as I possibly can. I want to have as much of the tip in contact with the pad as possible so that it will transfer heat as quickly as possible. So let's actually, this will be a better view. Even if it's not in focus, which it probably won't be because Logitech sucks a bag of dicks, you'll see what I mean. So I'm going to bring this soldering iron tip in really flat, and now I'm going to transfer heat really, really quickly because so much of the tip of the soldering iron is on the pad. I just move it around a little bit to spread the solder around. Be patient. Let this solder drop down into that through hole and remove, and don't do anything. Just let it cool down. All right. And now I'm going to turn the work around, and now you guys really won't be able to see. But getting the tip of the soldering iron flat on these pads is a really nice way to transfer heat quicker, which is just better. Like that's a good practice that you want to get. You want to try to transfer heat as quickly as possible. All right, so we're going to do the same thing over here, nice and flat, big explosion of smoke. That's the flux. Be patient. Try to touch the front of the tip of the soldering iron to the leg of the capacitor. That's making sure that the heat is dumping down into the through hole, and that looks real nice. So now what you want to do is you want to look at the other side of the through hole and see if you can see a little bit of solder kind of peeking through on the bottom. And in this case, we can on both. That is how you make sure that the solder penetrates all the way through the through hole. I'm going to show you in 1 second. Let me just get this out of the way. I'm going to try to show you. Let's see if Logidouche wants to play ball. So this is now the other side. And see if I can get the light to just catch it. All right, if you look at where those legs of the capacitor are coming through, you can see that there's a little bit of penetration of the solder. The solder actually flowed all the way down through the through hole, and it started to, yeah, you can really see it on the positive pad there. You see how it's not just a hole? You can actually like see the solder rounding up. I can see it a lot better with magnification on, but that's about as good as I can do with it for you guys. You can see it on both now. So yeah, you want to make sure that it's not like, what you don't want is, oh boy, I don't think these ones are as comfortable as the other ones. I might take this nose pad and swap it. It looks like it's just screwed on. You don't want like the hole and then the leg. Well, you don't want it to look exactly like it looks right now. You don't want to be able to see where the hole is going through, the leg is going through the hole. You want the solder to fill this in. So you want the solder to be like that, where it meets up with the hole here, right? Make sense? Next time you do one, you'll see what I mean. That in general, with through holes, you always want that. With through holes, you want to be able to look at the top and the bottom, and you don't want to be able to see the hole itself. You want to see that there's a convex area of solder covering up the through hole itself. So now we can just come in here with some flush cutters and cut these guys nice and flat. And there we go. We've put a much smaller capacitor on here. It's still hooked directly up to the holes, which for this build is going to work really, really well. And yeah, that's pretty awesome. What you can do at this point is put a little bead of E6000. What's really annoying is when you now come in to solder your battery leads on here, and you get these hot, and this capacitor starts to move around. This capacitor is like perfect right now, and so yeah, don't use hot glue because the ESC gets hot. Use a little bit of E6000. So once I'm done working on this, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. And so now you're gonna put your ESC back where it's gonna live, and now you can see the capacitor is sitting damn near completely flat on the bottom plate. But what really matters is that we can take our camera, and we will have room to give it some actual up tilt here. With the camera mounted in here, we'll be able to give some up tilt. Let's grab the top plate and really take a look. So we'll hold the cameras on the side here. Oh boy. Yeah. Well, I can't show you. I can't hold it up to show you guys, but I'm just gonna do it here. And so, if I put a bunch of up tilt in the camera, at what point does it? Oh my God! Well, I could run like that's like 30 degrees, and it's fine because the lens is actually coming right into this little pocket here. And so, yeah, this is going to be... And what's funny is as the up tilt goes up, it actually stops... Oh, no, there we go. I needed to move the ESC forward a little bit. There we go. Yeah, now that gives me plenty of up tilt. So there you go. That's where I put all of my capacitors on the Cinesplore builds, because it's kind of the only place. This ESC is going to sit a little bit higher here. We're going to talk about that in a second, but because of the way this capacitor is mounted to the bottom, we can just bend it a little bit downwards, and that'll keep the front part of the capacitor as low as it possibly can be, and that's where the camera is going to rub up against it. And also, because I left a little bit of extra on these legs, we can actually move the capacitor around a little bit. I can take this capacitor and I can move it like that, or I can move it like that, or I can do that with it because we've got that little bit of extra length on there. Try not to do that, though, because, again, these legs are very fragile. So, where we were going before we got all nuts about the capacitor was trying to figure out which grommets we're putting on the ESC versus the flight controller. And so... with this ESC, we want to get this pretty low. I always like to get the ESCs relatively low on the bottom plate. And so if you look here and I just hold this, you're just looking for daylight in between there. And so that's sitting super low. We're going to run M2 screws up here, and then you need to have something threaded on the bottom of the M2. This is really important. You never, ever, ever want to run your stack screws up and then just drop the ESC directly down on them. You got to run the stack screw up, and then you got to run either like an M2 or M3 nut on the bottom of it, or if that's too tall, they make 2 millimeter spacers that you can run that are a little bit thinner than the nuts. In this case, we're going to be using M2 hardware. and the M2 nuts are 3 millimeters tall. And so in this case, if I look at this, the press nuts are like roughly 1 millimeter, and then we've got a little bit of screw thread sticking through them. Call that like another millimeter. So we kind of might as well run one of the nylock nuts on the bottom here. I would not want just a 2 millimeter 2 millimeter guy on there. So for the ESC, we don't, this is fairly flat. We don't need to raise this ESC up a lot, and we kind of don't want to raise it up a lot because of this capacitor. We want this capacitor to stay low. And so I don't want to run this grommet on the ESC unless I put the thick part of the grommet facing upwards, but that's just kind of silly. So we're going to run the low grommets on the ESC. And the best way that I find to do these is to pinch them in your fingers like this, because you're just trying to get it started. And so pinch it and kind of push, pinch and push, pinch and push, pinch and push. And you're just trying to get enough of it through the other side where you can keep your finger on the bottom, and then you come up on the top and you just try to kind of like pull it through with your fingernail. And usually you can get them without a lot of trouble. You got to be really careful with these rubber grommets. They're super easy to kind of tear. And if you tear them, it's really bad because you can the PCB can push up against the conductive screw, and that can blow shit up. And so there you go. Some PCBs, it's a lot easier to do this on than others. Also, try it from either side. There's all kinds of shit on the bottom here, but I want to the top to be where I'm trying to pull it through, so I'm actually going to mash it through the bottom here. So the other way to do it is to use blunt-tipped tweezers, and it's going to be the same deal. You want to pinch it so that you can get it started going through. So push it through at like a 45-degree angle. Hold it with your thumb or just a finger. Pinch and push, pinch and push, pinch and push. And a lot of times with blunt-tipped tweezers, you can get it to go all the way through there. Don't use sharp-tipped tweezers because you'll cut the grommet, and you don't want that. But it's just that like pinch and push kind of motion. You're going to get it through there a little bit at a time, and now it's going to stay there on its own, nice and gentle. Just moosh it through the rest of the way. And there you go. It's good to do this while high or drunk because it's super annoying and it takes way longer than it should, unless you've done it a billion times like me. And yeah, you might as well. So if I try to, the top part of the board has less shit going on. So if I try to, it makes it easier for me. But then on this part, but then it makes it harder to kind of like pull it the rest of the way through. So if you do it this way, just try to mash it all the way in there. That actually worked. Actually worked really easily. These holes in this ESC are a little bit bigger. Sometimes you get these PCBs and these holes look like they're only like M2.5 or something. And that makes this so much harder. Let's see if I can even do it with a pair of needle-ish nose pliers. The main thing is just to chill when you're doing this. Don't get frustrated doing this. That's when you break shit. So there you go. All four of those guys on there. And so now the grommet has about 1 millimeter of thickness. And so then we're going to have a nut down here that's like 3 millimeters, and that's going to beef this thing up just enough. So next, we got to figure out what length of stack screw we need. The easy button is just to run the same length as your standoffs. I believe these are 30 millimeter standoffs. Let's see. The OmniFixo has a little ruler built in, which is just awesome. No, these are not. These are These are 25 millimeter standoffs. You want to keep in mind, though, that the screw is coming up through the thickness of the base plate. So these standoffs are 25. This base plate is like another 2 millimeters. Call it like 25. If I run a 25 millimeter stack screw here, it'll be pretty much just the right length. It'll give me like a 2 or 3 millimeter gap on top here, which is perfect in case there's like a battery strap going through there or whatever. So 25 millimeter would be just about perfect. M8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. I think these are the 25s then. No, that's not how I did this. I did 14, 16, and then I did 18, 20, 22. I guess this is 25, so it's probably these guys here. Try one of these. Okay, that's great. Yeah, that's about perfect. What are these, 30s? Yeah, these are 30s, Jesus. Let me go one size down and see what that looks like. Although it doesn't look like I have enough of these. Nah, that's a little too short anyway. So we're going to go here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. I always want to try to run the shortest possible stack screw to save a little bit of weight and just not to have a bunch of screw hanging out on top. But then inevitably it's a little bit too short and I have to do it all over again. So we're going to put one of these up from the bottom. And on the Cinesplore, this is like really tight here, which is actually kind of nice. Like, it's kind of hard to get it to pass the bottom part, but what's cool is if you just thread it in there, this like holds it and it won't pop out of here. Kind of slick. So we've got one through. Let's use that and we'll just do a rough test fit here. And so with that there, push that screw up a little bit. And then we'll take our flight controller. Oh yeah. Yeah, so this is totally fine. We got lots of space. Good to go. All right, so 25 is the move. Let's put all 4 of these in here. And then we will put some nuts on the bottom to lock these guys down. And I will explain to you why it's super important to put a nut on the bottom. Chris Rosser has a really good video discussing it called The Golden Nut. But it's something that a bunch of us actually figured out back in the days of the Acrobrat, how important this is. So, if you don't do that, if you just put these in like this, and they can wobble around, and you're like, well, it'll be fine. I'll put the ESC on here, and then I'll put the flight controller on, and between all that, it'll definitely be fine. It's not. I'm not going to do it, but basically, if you don't put something threaded on the top of these, the whole stack is going to do this. And it's going to do this, and when it does this, it's going to create its own weird resonant frequency that you're not going to be able to tune out, and it's going to be a total nightmare. So don't do that to yourself. Always put something threaded to lock these guys in so that they stand up like a tower of power, my friends. All right. The easy button is just to use the nylock nuts. The only time that I don't use a nylock nut is when they're going to be too tall. If I want 1 less millimeter of height, I will use these really handy little spacers that Newbie Drone sells. And they sell them in lots of fancy colors, which is really cool. And so yeah, that is a 2 millimeter spacer. If I was concerned about this ESC being a little bit too high on these, oh, I just spit all over. That's disgusting. On these guys, I would use those. but I am not. All right. Always try to pick 4 of these nylock nuts that are the same color. So I got 2 of one color, 2 of another color. This is the most important part. All right, there's one more with the white center. Sometimes the nylock in the center will be like a brighter white color. That's an easy way to tell which one is which. Which ones are which. Oh, there was one. Where is it? There it is. Get out of there. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Yeah. All right, now for the tedious part. I like to do this with this little nut grabber. And so I'll grab my nut, and then I can start getting it threaded. Wow. What's happened? Is that cross-threading? Yep. Show is. These have fresh nylock on them. Well, the nut grabber only works if the screws have been used before and the nylock is a little bit grooved in. Yeah, that one's fresh too. These looked like these were M2s that had been used before, so I thought I might be able to get away with it, but apparently not. That's all right. There is a Weeha tool that you will absolutely love from this point on, because I don't have many tools way of doing this is now to grab the nut with a pair of pliers and then put an M2 on here and just go cranking away on the M2. But Weeha makes this, and I mean, I'm sure lots of different people make this, but I love Weeha tools. They make this guy, which is 265 /4.0 by 60. If you just type in Weeha 265, you'll find this. This whole shaft is hollow here. And so this will bring this nut all the way to the bottom, which is really nice. So you can just put a 1.5 mil on the bottom, and then it'll fall off. And you can do it again. I guess it kind of doesn't matter, but this guy is just awesome. I absolutely love it. It's got the little red cap on the bottom that you can put in the palm of your hand, and then it makes spinning this thing on a lot faster. I guess the shaft here is not hollow, but it's hollow all the way up there. Watch how deep this thing will go. That's what she said! See that? Isn't that cool? And there you go. Let me do it the other way. Other way to do it is to hold this guy. Yeah, it's just a little more janky this way. It's fine though. I like this other way better. The Weeha is just, they're just awesome. And like the handles aren't so thick. Like I love these MIP drivers, but these handles are so thick that you can really over tighten stuff. These Weeha drivers, like the handle is perfect. And the handle being smaller, you get more turns per spin of your fingers or whatever. Danzel the Terrible bought a proper set of MIP screwdrivers last week. Oh, the luxury. Yeah, MIPs are really, really nice. If you want to treat yourself, get yourself a set of MIP drivers. But just be careful. These it's more so on these bigger guys. You know, like, look at the difference, right? Like, this will deliver like twice as much torque than this will. And so with a MIP driver like this, you can absolutely strip shit out. With these Weehas, you will not strip shit out very often, if at all. Where'd the other screws go? There they are. Okay. And I've heard that the little electric screwdrivers are getting better and better and better. I don't know. This is fine. I'm fine maintaining some dexterity in my hand in this, and just like kind of doing this by hand. It's whatever. If I was gonna build 100 fucking rigs in a row or something like that, I would probably do it. But Kevin Sumner says, I broke my 1.5mm MIP driver last week, snapped the shaft in half while trying to use it to push a plastic bushing into a 3D print. Oh, that sucks. Every once in a while, when we use the wrong tool for the wrong job, we get reminded of it. All right, you don't need to crank these down. The nylock will keep them from vibrating out. But what you absolutely do want to do is grab each one of these and wiggle it to make sure that it's tight enough. And so now we have a nice solid platform for our ESC and our flight controller to sit on. And that absolutely matters. Do not F that up, my friends. You will have tuning issues that you can never figure out because nobody ever thinks that their stack is actually what's vibrating around. Denzel the Turbo says it's called the Golden Nut. Yeah, he watches. You can always tell when people watch Rosser. Denzel the Terrible says Ciotti needs to pay the Teddy tax. I'm going through withdrawal. Jimmy the Cow says we need our spaghetti dose. Where's the Teddy? Show me your Teddy. Hey, buddy, come here. Come here with those silly pajamas. Hey, you've been summoned. Come here. Come here. Come here. Get over here. Come here. Look what I got. It's your toy. No, he can't take it. He can't take it. Look how ridiculous this dog looks in these pajamas that Maggie bought for him. They're Snoopy pajamas, and they go around his back legs, too. Come here, buddy. And they got a fake little butt flap. Just outrageous. Here, move like that. Move like this. Look at this. Look at this. Look at him. He looks like a little child running around. I'm so sorry, buddy. Your mother has just killed any masculinity you might have. Although you don't have much because you're a 20-pound dog. So just be cool with it, brother. It's all good. All right. Nathan Wells says everything is a hammer. Use it as a flat screwdriver, then it's a pry bar. Yeah, unless it's a flat screwdriver, then it's a pry bar. Denzel the Terrible says it's pronounced cute. You just don't know fashion. Indeed. FizzPV says if the flap gets over the tail, bad stinky things happen. Trust me, I know. No, these are well-engineered dog clothes. They leave his dingus and his butthole totally free. The previous shirt that we had on him did not, and he pissed all over it, and it was a effing nightmare. Like, you had one job to do. You're making dog clothes. Obviously, the dog is not going to take the clothes off before it pisses on the grass. What are you doing? Why have you done that? Why would anyone design dog clothes that way? So now you get to put your ESC down here and see if you screwed up. You need to have plenty of, not plenty of, but at least a little bit of space when you push down on it. Imagine that you flat bottom this thing into the ground from 100 feet up. You want to be able to push down and make sure that nothing's going to hit. In this case, we've got a little bit of a situation here where it's able to move because these grommets have an M3 sized hole in the middle, but we're using M2 hardware because that's what this frame is drilled for. And so most of you have kicking around in your toolbox these little M2 to M3 brass bastards. Never throw these away. These are awesome. You can use these as spacers. You can use these as adapters. In this case, we're using these as adapters. You can buy these on eBay for no money at all. Really, really, really nice to have. M2 to M3 adapters. So we're just going to take these guys, thread them on here, and just zip them down. And so one of the other things to remember if you're using these M3 grommets is that when these things interface with these M2 nuts, they can kind of push down a little bit. Let me see if I can show this to you. They can push down. Oh, well, you can totally see it there. All right, ready? So you see there's like that little extra millimeter on the top of the nut there. Watch this, right? It'll actually slot. See that? It'll slot down over it. So you got to make sure, do that on all four, and make sure that you still have enough of a gap. See how the plastic plug header is starting to get awful close? That's a bit much. It should be fine, but again, if we push down on this good and hard, we can actually get that plastic plug header to hit the base plate, and we don't want that. Another thing that's worth it for you to get, that I don't remember where I got them from, but M2 are M2, I guess they're just washers. Yeah, really thin M2 washers. You'll get like 100 of them for $1, and you'll never use all of them. Super nice to have. We don't want to add any height here, and so these little thin bastards are perfect. They also make they make little 1mm spacers in. I'm sorry, they make M2 spacers in 1mm thick, like this guy. But I don't want to add that millimeter. I have enough clearance now that it's not going to be slotting those grommets down over that soft part of the that little raised part of the M2 nut. And so I'm going to pull this off, and then we're going to drop these little thin spacers down on here. Come on, you bastard. Come off of there. Great. There we go. And so now this little adapter guy, M2 to M3 adapter guy, will actually hold that spacer down, which is really cool. And so now we've got the perfect little setup where it's going to sit up just that little tiny bit higher. Actually, if you push down hard enough on these M3 grommets, they'll start to go over the main part of these M2 nuts. So you do have to pay attention to this. In the case that you're using the grommets with the M3 hole in the middle on an M2 screw. If we weren't doing that, if we were using M3 hardware, then we'd be totally fine. So this is actually some of these little adapters I've used as nuts on the top of stacks, and they've got blue Loctite inside of them so they don't spin down like this, and that's actually one of them right there. So I'm gonna have to go back in that little kit. Oh my god, it's after midnight already. Are you kidding me? All right, so I mean that's gonna kind of be about it. I can't believe how little we got how little I got done. Proper builds take time, and scratch builds take time. I've certainly built a couple of these Cinesplores, but I haven't built enough to know like the exact setup of these risers and whatnot. I have a really good idea, and like, you know, I didn't have to do much experimenting. But yeah, scratch builds take time. Anybody that says they can do a scratch build in 2 hours, don't buy anything from them, because it's going to be so awfully built that it's going to blow up pretty immediately. It's just unrealistic if you're paying attention and doing good quality work, in my opinion. So there we go. Another one of those. And all right. And so now, when I put this ESC on here, it's not going to be able to move all over the goddamn place anymore. Ready? So it's going to sit in there like that. It goes down on those little adapters. And now I can't move it at all. Cool. And with the ESC, the grommets are really only there to keep the damn thing from like grenading components when you slam really hard. And so now when you look at the gap, we've got a much nicer gap underneath the plastic plug header there. Yeah, I've got like probably about 1.5 millimeters there, even when I push down on this thing. And so there you go. That's how you get your ESC perfectly mounted. And so now and at this point it's like, all right, great. Now I'm going to solder the motors on. Don't solder the motors on yet. It's just you're going to have a bunch more shit that like your hands are going to be fighting against. Keep building it from the middle. And so now next we're going to start working on this. These grommets with the extra tall piece here are actually going to be really nice for this flight controller because this extra little bit of rubber is going to drop down like that, and that's going to space the flight controller up a little bit, so we probably won't need to run another spacer in here. Like, they give these massive spacers. We would certainly not need that. That would be crazy. I might run a little tiny spacer. I don't love the idea. I don't usually love the idea of having both of these guys only separated by rubber. I typically like to lock the ESC down with something threaded here just so that it's solid and then the flight controller can sit on top. What I'm worried about with freestyle builds is if I hit inverted, if it's just grommet to grommet like this, there's a chance that the ESC can come upwards and smash into the flight controller. I mean, those are pretty low kind of chances of that, but still. Usually you need a little tiny bit more of a space, so I might just throw 4 quick little 2mm threaded spacers on here. Because, yeah, I do have some extra thread up here. I don't need all of this extra thread on top here. So if I can gobble up 2mm or so, that'll bring this thing here, and then that's the perfect amount of space on top there below my fingernail for an M2 nut. So yeah, I'll probably do a set of these little guys here, these little tiny 2mm jib jabs. Is there a color that that Drew is going with? I don't know what Drew's favorite color is, but I don't have many of these. Oh, here, I have some black ones. Perfect. Cool. So yeah, little set of 2mm guys. I would not do a nylock nut. It's just kind of annoying. What I really like about these, you could use these little plastic M2 nuts. These would totally work. It doesn't have to be strong. It just has to be something to keep that ESC pushed down. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to use these little plastic nuts. These will be totally fine. We'll save a little bit of weight here. That's not a little plastic nut. What is that? Yeah, these little plastic nuts that I know most of you have floating around. This is why, like, don't throw shit away. When you buy an ESC or a flight controller and it comes with, like, some extra stuff, don't throw it away. Hoard all that shit. These little plastic nuts are absolutely perfect for what we're about to do. Right? So you just throw these guys on here real quick, and they're going to hold this ESC down. Because this ESC already has some good kind of like tension between the grommet and that little adapter that we put in there. And so, yeah, you don't have to go ham on this bit here. The only thing I don't love about doing this is that you gotta kind of, it's like a little bit of an inexact science how tight you make these guys. you don't want to over tighten one of these, and then the flight controller can kind of like wobble back and forth in there. So get these down and just try to twist these with roughly the same amount of force. Denzel the Turbo says, are you putting a nut between the flight controller and ESC? I am indeed. Kevin Sumner says, Toolbox says, building a quad. You're going to love my nuts. Indeed. All right. Yeah, I'm also kind of like weirdly afraid that the ESC will like vibrate upwards into the flight controller, and like, I don't know, weird shit can maybe start happening. So I'll usually do just a little something in between, even if it's just like, even if it's not threaded. I just like to have something here. It weirds me out having grommet up against grommet. And so what I'll do to make sure I don't over tighten these is I won't pinch them to tighten them. I'll just go like this. And like whatever amount of like grip that my finger can get like this, that's perfect. It tightens it up a little bit. It pushes it against the grommet. And then it doesn't over tighten it. And it's easy to kind of get all four to roughly the same tightness. And then drop your ESC on top. And with the ESC on top here without grommets in it, I can just take it in all four corners and just kind of push on it and make sure that it doesn't do one of these. You don't want it to go diagonal here. You want it to stand up even like that. So kind of put it on and that like this, and that's how you can tell if your nuts are all roughly tightened the same amount. Once you have the grommets on, it'll be a little bit more forgiving, but yeah, that's a super slick way of kind of getting that. Now, I don't know if I'm going to put this flight controller in here like this or like that. So, and these grommets are not unidirectional. And so the next part is figuring that out, figuring out how the flight controller is going to sit. There's 8 different orientations of the flight controller. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Realistically, there's 4 different orientations because you're not going to put your USB port forwards or backwards because then you couldn't plug into the damn thing. So realistically, this is going to sit like that, or like that, or like that, or like that. There's no reason to not mount this thing upside down. Sometimes I really like, if I ever have to mount an ESC with the ESC plug header facing upwards, I love to mount the flight controller with the plug headers facing downwards, so that if the ESC plug header is in the back here, I'll put the flight controller plug header here in the front to use up some of that wasted space. One of the things to think about on a Cinesplore, if the USB plug is offset a little bit like this one, I kind of want it to be back as far away from the duct as possible, so that there's a potential to get one of these little 90-degree bastards snuck in there while the duct is still on. It's super annoying to have to remove the duct just to plug in. Not the end of the world because you don't plug in all that often, but I would love to have this USB port either here or like that, so that it's as far back as possible, right? The duct is going to come up here. The center line of the duct is going to be right here. And so this USB port is as far as possible. So I would love to do it like that. We've got an ESC plug header in the back here. And then here's the plug header for on the flight controller. So that's kind of nice because that ESC to flight controller plug is just going to loop right here. I do have enough space in here for those wires to go. If the VTX and the flight controller are going to be right up on top of each other, then you would not want to do that. You would want to take the flight controller plug header and face it forwards, so that the wires can come, the plug header can come out of here, loop directly up, go across, and then plug in to the front. But that's not the case. I have this nice space here, so I can easily mount this like this. And then the other consideration is on this flight controller. We've got a plug header here for the VTX, and it is really nice to, with a Vista, the Vistas don't have a plug header on them. You direct solder. So it's actually really nice to direct solder here and then have a plug header on the other side that you can just kind of plug in there. And so this will be totally fine having this plug header here. The other option is I could put this plug header back there, but there's no advantage to it being there. The USB kind of takes priority. So I think I'm going to put it like this. There's really no reason to mount it like this. Also, there's a push button on here for DFU mode, and so putting this push button downwards is a total pain in the ass. So this makes the most sense putting it up this way. You can also start taking a look at what all these pads are and figure out oh, maybe I want these pads to be on the back of the flight controller. No, it's fine. You can. So, these the video system is going to be plugged in here, and then maybe there's an RX and TX in this little cluster here for the receiver. If not, just run the receiver wires up here and then run them up high. That's totally fine. So this is how this guy is going to sit, and it's 12:20. I'm going to end it there. Denzilla says, am I doing it wrong by not putting a nut betwixt the flight controller and ESC? Not really. It's... I don't on a hardcore freestyle build, maybe, because the ESC is heavy, and when you crash inverted, it can hit really hard. And so on a full tilt freestyle build, I would say, yeah, put a nut there for sure. In this case, I'm kind of using that nut as just a spacer, just to get a little bit more distance there. It's not that big of a deal. I've gone back and forth, and sometimes I'll be like, oh, it makes it harder it makes it more time consuming to take apart because it's just 4 more things that are threaded, right? But yeah, it's a pretty low importance kind of thing, to be totally honest. But on a hardcore freestyle rig that's gonna get the shit slammed out of it, I do think it's worth it. Because I can totally see that ESC on an inverted collision moving upwards and smashing itself into the flight controller. It would probably be fine, but it's not a good thing. And then you never know what's gonna happen. The other thing that kind of weirds me out is that I don't want the ESC to come up like this, and then the flight controller wants to sit like this. And then your accelerometer is going to be weird, and God knows what else could potentially happen. So I don't know. I don't know if it's right or wrong. But other than on a build that you're going to smash the shit out of, I would definitely do it on a build like that. On a Cinewoop, I'm using it as a spacer, realistically. But yeah, that's. A lot of things in the building process I'm pretty dead set on, and it's yes, I've done this both ways, and it's definitely better one way than the other. This is not one of them. This is one of the things that I'm a little bit wishy-washy with, of it might make a difference, it might not. I don't think it's bad to do it that way. I don't think there's anything that could be bad about having a threaded spacer, just holding the ESC down, right? That's really what you're doing. And so, yeah, if it ain't going to be bad, it's fine. Add those nuts, friends. You want as many nuts as you possibly can. So there you go, friends. That's what I can get done in about an hour and a half of scratch building. Doing it, as cleanly and as perfectly as possible. Cutting a couple corners here and there. I'm not being completely insane, but I'm getting close. But, when I do a build, it doesn't fall out of the air. And with a Cinewoop, that tends to be incredibly important, because the whole point of a Cinewoop is to fly it around subjects. And typically there's subjects that you don't want to smash into. So I'm going to stop for the night, because I want to put E6000 on this capacitor so that it stays in place. And I actually just realized that I need to do the battery leads on this ESC. So I'm actually going to take these nuts off of here because I'm going to do the battery leads with the ESC outside of the quad for a little bit more space. And so yeah, the never-ending back and forth of like when you're doing a build, you put it together and then you realize you forgot something, you take it back apart, waste a bunch of time, put it back together, realize that you forgot something else, take it back apart, put it back together, take it back apart, put it back together. Yeah. Apache Foku and Sniper's in the house. He says, "Good morning. How are you doing? I'm back home from China. Very cool. How was it?" Well, don't tell me how it was right now because I'm about to stop the stream. Tell me next stream. I just dropped one of these nuts on the floor. Hey, I can see it because it's black and not silver. P-Money says, "Time flies, just getting into it. LOL, full send." Cole FPV says, "3D print a spacer to save weight." Yep, 3D printing spacers is totally fine. I have loads and loads and loads of spacers and threaded things, so I haven't had to do it yet. But yeah, nothing wrong with that. Denzel the Terrible says, "Thanks for the info. Going to add a nut to my glides now." Yep, glides should have nuts. But although, if you're flying glides, why are you not putting the 20x20 flight controller up front? I'm guessing you're running a 30x30 flight controller and you can't. But one of my favorite things about the glide frame is that you can put your 30x30 ESC in the middle and then run a 20x20 flight controller up front. It's just so slick. Such a cool setup. Makes it a little bit easier to work on, in my opinion. And it makes it a little bit lighter, right? Because a 20x20 flight controller is lighter than a 30x30. You motherfuckers, not a single person mentioned... Well, you didn't. Maybe you did, but you didn't tag me. Not a single person mentioned my fucking haircut. I see how it is, you jerks. It's fine. It's fine. Maybe it's bad and you guys just didn't want to embarrass me. So yeah, the last thing I'm going to do is push this all the way down here and then take a look at where this capacitor is, and then I'm just going to push down on the capacitor to get it essentially as low as it can possibly be, and then I'll give this thing a little hit of E6000. And so just kind of holding the ESC down and then just lightly pushing down on this capacitor just to get it down as low as possible. And there it is. That's looking pretty good. There's a tiny little gap between it and the base plate. And then so if I, one more time really quick, grab the camera. This is the shit that you need to double and triple and quadruple check. The camera can sit there, and then with it mounted like that, we can get just enough up tilt. Yep, there we go. Looking good. Cool. So yeah, now I can E6000 this capacitor, and E6000 takes like at least 12 hours to cure. So I will call it here, come back to this thing hopefully tomorrow. Hopefully I can bash through a bunch of this tomorrow. That'd be really nice. I'm not going to go bananas with the E6000, just a little bit. Just a little tiny bead here on the bottom. A little bead, and I would use actual E6000 for this, what I'm about to do. Don't use T7000, the black stuff. It like shrinks up when it dries. Regular clear E6000, it doesn't like dehydrate when it dries. It stays the same thickness. And in this case, we want the thickness to be a little bit of a buffer in between the capacitor and the ESC. You can also kind of use this like liquid electric tape to as like a little bit of an insulator on the legs of this capacitor. So a little bit there, a little bit there, just real quick on the bottom here. And then really what I want to do is up on top, I just want to put a little hit between the cap and the ESC. So just drag it up there like that, and then just kind of moosh it in there. Drag it up on top like that. And there we go. Just a little something something to kind of keep it from moving around. When you're like doing the build, you'll have a tendency to like push in against the capacitor and it'll get it all weird. And so this is a nice way to just kind of hold it in place a little bit better. And again, you really want to make sure that the legs don't break off of this capacitor. And this is a nice way of doing that. Just a little bit here on the bottom as well. There we go. That's nice. And again, you want to use E6000 and not hot glue for this. The ESC will get hot enough where the hot glue will soften up, and that's like not the point. And so there we go. There is a beautifully prepped ESC for my buddy Drew. Oh God! All right, friends. Always clean the tip of this, and then put this back in. I've been using this one same tube of E6000 for a long time. It has not dried up. Yeah. E6000 is also called Welder. It's like a red bottle with silver writing, I believe. Thanks for hanging, friends. FizzPV with the last comment of the live stream. He says, I'm not the guy to judge a haircut. Mine is a graying mohawk. LOL. Sporty says, you were indeed looking very handsome today. There we go. Now I feel better. Now I don't feel neglected by you sons of bitches. Thanks for hanging, friends. I hope you learned something. I'll see you guys on Friday, right? Yeah, I had a gig on Friday, but it got canceled, so I will see you on Friday. I'm going to play you something. What am I going to play you? HD0003. What is this? Well, it's 5 seconds long, so it's nothing. What is this? Past me. Say out loud what I'm about to fly.
Right
yeah, here we go. Oh, God.
Right spots and
what am I saying?
spinning the right direction.
Oh, this thing's flying
What
like
I'm doing
shit.
right now, though.
Why is this thing flying so bad? What is? I don't want to show you that. Oh my God, are there no flight files with anything of interest on here? What's happening? This is just the memory card with a bunch of DVR.
The lens, that purple.
Oh, this is okay. So this is the
Dynamic auto
CO3.
start percentage. All right, so the dynamic auto start percentage.
Oh, this is when I was
Increase
screwing around with the
speed
dynamic
and
idle. Yeah.
electric tape on the back of the lens, that purple.
No, I don't want to watch that. Hold on. What's this? What about this?
The
The Gep RC motors. The Gep RC 1002 25,000s. For anybody that missed it the other day, here you go.
5,000s. The 1002 25,000s.
Here you guys go. This is one of my favorite 1S 75mm builds at the moment. I'll see you guys on Friday. See you. Thanks for hanging, friends. CiottiFPV.com. Support me or I'll die.